Oh, here we go. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Lochaber Talks Podcast. Today, we'll start off something new. We're going to have a quarterly catch up with some councillors here, and we're just going to talk about issues that the constituents of the area want to talk about, and some of our viewers as well. So we'll encourage you to write to your councillors here, email them, do whatever you need to do. We're just going to speak about issues here, and we will leave you and encourage you to get in contact with them with any issues that you have or anything that they bring up. And maybe they'll be brought up in the next episodes, and we'll get catch-ups and stuff like that. So what we're going to do is we're going to start off by asking Andrew and John about their issues that their constituents bring up. Then, like I said, I'll bring up a couple that we've got. And so we'll get started. So first up, we have Andrew Baxter, and you're our councillor for Ward 21, which is Fort William and Ardnamurchan. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right.
Brilliant. So Andrew, would you just tell us a little bit about yourself and what it is you do as a councillor?
Okay, so I've been living in Lochaber for 18 years now. I bought the post office down in Kinlochleven, which is sadly no more. And I spent 10 years as councillor for Fort William and Ardnamurchan all the way up to 2022 when I decided to stand down. I wanted a bit of a break. And then I found myself earlier this year saying to my wife, well, that's me done with politics. And little did I know how things can change. Angus MacDonald gets elected to Parliament. He asked me to go and work with him because I have experience in the political world. And then he said, do you fancy standing in your old ward for my by-election? And the by-election was back in November, and so I'm back on the council again. What's my role as a councillor? I think I've always said in all my elections that I am one of Lochaber's voices on the council and not the other way round. Many councillors sort of inexplicably end up in council headquarters and they suddenly find themselves being an apologist for the council or seeing themselves as being the spokesman for their council in their area. And I'm definitely not that. And I think I have a reputation for not being that. And other than that, sort of representing the views of my constituents and enabling their voices to be heard, I guess the other primary role that I see myself is just being someone that can sort of get through that bureaucracy, knock on the right doors, be able to pick up the telephone where constituents have struggled to get a response or are unclear about anything that's happening in their lives, whether it's getting a council house repair or a pothole looked at in their road. And I think John will probably agree a lot of our time is spent dealing with what maybe many people will think are quite minor issues, but actually they're really important to the people that have that problem at that particular point in time.
And I suppose you and John and other councillors and stuff, I suppose you'll be doing a lot of work because you'll be getting a lot of correspondence. And of course, you're going to have to spend a lot of time, like you said, doing that. So that's probably something that a lot of people don't consider. I imagine you spend a lot of hours as councillor doing what you do and plus doing all that correspondence as well. Would that be correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's what you make of it. Actually, one of the things, if you're going to do your job effectively as a councillor, other than responding to the emails and the telephone calls and going to community council meetings, things like that, there's a lot of reading. I don't think people appreciate, and it is always a surprise for new councillors. There is a lot of stuff to get through. I think actually it's a tactic by the council to bamboozle you. So you get a 150-page report of quite detailed information to read, in a fairly short time.
Yeah.
And what I always find, it annoys officers if you've actually read it, because then you can answer questions. So I actually always make sure that I devote a lot of time in reading through all that, because actually you will find stuff hidden away that I'm pretty sure they hope that councillors won't discover.
Well, I've got to say, Andrew, I really admire you there because I understand exactly what you're saying, but you have to be of the mind where you're just going to sit down and read a lot of stuff. It takes some willpower to do that, doesn't it? And some focus.
Yeah.
Cool. John, would you give us
Yeah, sure. So I'm autistic. I originated from North Wales. And came up here to live about 18 years ago now. And my daughter went to the local school for Kilkenny and Port Augustus. I was on the permanent council for a while. I worked, or still work, as a psychotherapist. Now I mainly work with people with autism and their families and their employers and all that sort of thing. So I've still got a sort of another job as well. I'm councillor of Ward 11 and Cool on the Lake. We've got one of the biggest community council areas in the UK in our area. The distance from the top of the ward where I live down to Mallig at the other end is about a 2.5 hour drive. If I'm talking about going over to the islands, I'm talking 3.5 hours, maybe a longer day if we get stuck. So yeah, it's something I deal with just recently. Again, glass collections. It comes up every year. The contractor, I don't know whether it's because of the volume, but they certain time of year they seem to not manage to collect all the glass. We get broken glass, we get piles of bags. So that's become a regular issue of mine. I can remember putting in the diary and think, yeah, okay, 2 weeks time, it's going to be glass collections. Other issue that for the rest at the moment, the big major development and planning, I'm a substitute on the planning committee, so we don't go to every planning meeting, but I go to a lot. The big major wind farm, battery storage systems, hydro places. All of those, we've got 3 hydro projects tabled within my ward, never mind the whole Lochaber area. We've got wind farms galore, radio masts, and there is a malcontent about the way planning is. People, I think communication with the council is a really big issue. I quite often get people saying, well, just don't get any answers, nobody will talk to us, nobody tells us what's going on. So I guess a bit like Andrew, I spend a lot of time chasing people, emails, telephone. And funny enough, the easiest, if they're there, is to actually meet them in headquarters or down in Charles Campbell House. Unfortunately, lots of homeworking now, so you don't even get that chance.
All right. Is there, John, is there much like this going on, like video conferencing and stuff like that? Because like you said, I mean, it's good to meet up, but rather than emails and stuff, is that, I mean, would that be optimum, or is it just not possible to do that? It's just quicker to do emails for everybody, I suppose.
There are some videos and meetings. They tend to be for workshops. You can go into committees online. Personally, I prefer the personal touch. I go in person into Inverness, so yeah, I spend all the time travelling. I probably don't spend as much time in my ward because I don't HQ.
Yeah.
And I forget to talk to all the councillors. If I'm in a committee meeting, there's a lot of officers in that committee meeting, or somebody might be just down the corridor. I can actually look to my door and say, "Oi, I sent you an email 3 weeks ago. It looks like you. Can I look at it, please?"
Words, yeah. I mean, I suppose that's the best issue to start off with. It's just how do you cope? How do you cope with all this? There's so much to go on, going through all the red tape, the bureaucracy, communication, and everything. It's kind of, I imagine that must take a long time to get your head around.
I think when Andrew came again, I was slightly envious. I think the first 2 years, certainly the first 12 months, I did virtually nothing but running learning documents, this policy, and where to do this and what to do with that. But funnily enough, an hour of work time spent getting the computer put right. Next didn't work, I couldn't do this. So the first year really was, it was a very steep learning curve. I'm trying to sort out, well, okay, I'm here, I'm councillor, what do I do now? What? Now I'm my head drilled.
Well, Andrew, if you could, like I said, if you wouldn't mind bringing up the issues in your constituency, the ones that you think are most important, that are brought up to you regularly, if you could start off with an issue and we could talk about that and get John to speak afterwards. After you.
Yeah, I suppose the big issue that is particularly concerning people in the Fort William area at the moment is the level of antisocial behaviour and vandalism in the town. And we've seen that recently on the front page of the Lochaber Times. I've experienced it because I run Angus MacDonald's constituency office, which is on the high street, and we had 2 of our windows smashed on 2 separate occasions across the course of a week, which had led to an inordinate amount of time trying to sort that out and get them repaired, dealing with insurers, and because he's an MP, dealing with House of Commons security that take the safety of MPs really, really seriously these days. And that was really frustrating for me because it diverted my team away from helping constituents. And then we see further along the high street, people smashing the window in the Highland Hospice, and Maggie Wilson, who does a fantastic job running the hospice, one of the best shops and the best looking shops in the high street, raises lots of money for a good cause. Her having to divert her attention away to deal with that. And, why break a charity shop's window? And it's not the first time it's happened to Maggie. And that's going to cost them money, and it's going to divert money away from what it's meant for. And there's a whole row of shop fronts along that particular end of the town centre that saw that vandalism. And then we've seen it escalating a bit more recently with youngsters I've heard of cases where they've been taking wheelie bins and packing them full of stuff and setting fire to them, and then setting fire to bins in the parade, and then vandalising few fourth public toilets so that they're closed again, and the cost to the council for that. So community councils, business owners, residents are quite rightly sort of concerned about the level of antisocial behaviour and what can be done about it. Go on.
I was just going to say, so this is obviously like a policing problem as well.
Yeah, it is, and I sort of, to a certain extent, I feel sorry for the police because they're having to, to deal with these youngsters that are almost running riot, and I know from some of the conversations that I've had with the police is that unfortunately much of the problem is probably at home, with parents that are not particularly engaged with the kids or particularly concerned about their behaviour or what they're up to. And, that is quite clearly a contributory factor. I'm almost sort of also concerned that because of their ages, what the criminal justice system can do is quite limited because they're under 16. They're dealt within the children's reporter system, and their sanctions, their disciplines, if you like, are quite limited by law. So the police reporting them to them, maybe not getting the action that the police want or what the community wants. So it is difficult, and it just, what really concerns me is that it is, I'm hearing of examples of people that are living in the town centre wanting to move out of the town centre. And previously, when I was a councillor, we did a lot of work in getting people back into living in our town centre as sort of an effort to revitalise it, and actually to make it safer, because the thought was if you had people in the town centre, then some of these problems are then mitigated. And we had Lochaber House and Tweedale Apartments converted into really good living accommodation, but if people are now worried about actually living in Fort William in the town centre, that's a really worrying situation to be.
Would I be right in saying, Andrew? The under 16, I can get it because it is children. But like you said, the people who broke the windows, say in the high street and stuff, and I'm just, hypothesizing here, but is this a problem with the policing where it may be that, there would be a deterrent there before? Whoever this person or persons are doing this, if it's concentrated on prosecuting these people, right, adults, and prosecuting them, surely that would act as a deterrent. Do you think we've got to the point where, there's not enough follow-up? There's not enough to worry people doing this because they think, nothing's going to happen. Do you think it's that bad, or?
Yeah, I think there probably is an element of that. I think there's also an element of, since our police forces were centralised, and I understand lots of the political arguments as to why Police Scotland was created, but many councillors at the time in particular were saying it's taken away that local community policing. We know that we saw a loss in police numbers in Lochaber, and that specialist units were set out elsewhere. And so it makes it look as though we haven't seen a fall off in police numbers in Highlands. It's just their configuration is wrong. And I have lots of friends that are police officers in Lochaber, and I know that they are really stretched to the limit at times, particularly at weekends. And so much so that, if they were to arrest someone, it effectively means there are no police covering the rest of Lochaber whilst they are having to deal with that, or maybe transport someone to Inverness to appear at the court the following day. And so, they're put in a really difficult position. Do they take the light touch policing, or do they arrest someone and leave the rest of us exposed in the meantime? And I know that has happened. I'm not saying that's the cause at the moment, but I think we need a more fundamental look at how our police force is configured and whether we're getting the right resources for rural areas like ours.
Yeah, good point, Andrew. And I think, this is going to be an issue. I think that we'll probably mention every quarter to see how this is going. It's a vital part of our infrastructure, isn't it? John, do you want to add anything to that? Would you like to? Do you have any problems where you are? What's your constituents think about this subject?
If the policing now is really quite quiet. Unfortunately, last year the library was broken into, and some of the University of the Highlands installation there was damaged, which is really, really unusual. Somebody told me, and I said, "What? Really?" And it's like, "Why did you don't get that?" Yeah, in terms of that, it was very damaging. It's sort of to see that sort of crime come to light, as it were. It's like, so it definitely is changing. Officers, in time from now, I used to work with a local police officer. We used to do the cycle training courses around schools. There is now no local police officer in Fort Augustus. Actually, Fort William has increased its police numbers. I can remember a time when there used to be one traffic bobby on duty at night in the whole of the Highlands. Wow. Right the way from the Grand stop right the way up to the top of Sutherland. Now at least we do have, I think, 2 traffic policemen in Fort William. So yeah, that is an improvement. Andrew said it's really stretched. And then on top of that, we've got the community council saying, "Look, you haven't been to our meeting. Can you please come to our meeting?" It's like,
Okay, that's really interesting. It sounds to me that you would both agree that we probably need to look into policing and probably need more policing. We need more resources and more manpower. Is that correct?
Yeah, definitely. I think if I was to pick an issue, and I'm thinking, I would pick communication, because that covers all the issues I've got. The car parking with Malek, the new plan that's being done, a lot of work's been put into a new plan. Car parking in Malek had been an issue for many, many years. The issue of people on the islands and their parking spaces, huge issue. Recently done a survey, they've issued a plan, and the residents are up in arms because the plan doesn't answer all the questions that they've raised. So it's like, ain't anybody listening to us? The hydro project, the SSE dam, again, residents have got flourishes, as it were, and plan that it's changed overnight, and it would seem like the contractors and the SSE just do what they want. There doesn't seem to be a breach of communication, and I think it affects everything. The police officers, because the numbers can't be there. Again, a big issue in my particular world, which affects the whole Lochaber, is the Most Park nursing home, and again, the communication in that. Okay, I can understand the council's position, but there are people in the community who actually knew more than me. They'd come up and say, "Oh, did you know about this?" But then they still didn't know the whole story. So obviously this barrier of silence wasn't working, because people were still getting leaked information. So it's like it'll tone the whole thing, and then maybe they'd actually be easier with it. And sort of communication to me, I think is one really, really needs looking at.
That does sound concerning, John, because, like, you know, especially the issues that you're mentioning here, it's absolutely paramount that you get good information, because otherwise, how are you meant to act or represent? Okay, Andrew, what do you think about this communication? Do you find that a big problem within the council and working sort of interagency?
Yeah, and I've always thought it's a big issue. And one of the reasons I stood in the council back in 2012, I suppose, was because of lack of communication. Our public toilets in my village in Kinlochleven didn't open after the winter closure, and they are really vitally important. We get tens of thousands of visitors walking through the village on the West Highland Way, and more often than not, the first thing they want to do when they get to the village is go to the loo and have a cup of tea. And I was astonished that I discovered that that they were not reopening, but that then councillors had decided this in a secret behind closed doors meeting. And no one had been told about this decision in the village. And that is the perfect example of crass lack of communication. And I had rather naively hoped that communication and the plethora of private meetings had maybe changed in my 2.5-year absence from the council. But unfortunately it isn't. And I don't think that the council's communications have got any better than they have before. And all we seem to get is lots and lots of rather boring press releases issued from our communications department that don't really tell anything, like to slap themselves on the back, but that don't really address any of the issues that people are really interested in.
Geez, that sounds like a description of the macro picture as well. It's almost, you know, the more we communicate, the more ability we have to communicate with each other, the more distortion sort of gets in and it amplifies, isn't it? It's like a really muddied water out there. And it's like, where do you make sense? A simple issue with, like you said, keeping some toilets open seems to be really hard to do. Yeah, it's. I can see that must be very, very frustrating.
I think it's so. I think the communication extends as well from the council to the Scottish government. There are several issues in the opposition at the moment. I still want to cooperate with people and do the best for the community. But you will ask somebody, look, can you speak to this minister? Can you press the case for this, the weakness of the Highlands and why this government policy or government strategy isn't working here? Or we talk to the naked, or we talk to cover. You sort of get but an excuse. And I find again, it seems like, again, my impression, it seems like there's a resistance to challenge the government. Because the administration's SNP and the government's SNP, or that's the reason we use. And again, the lack of communication flow in terms of, they've seen how desperate it is. So I think it's a big issue. Sorry.
Is that are you describing? Would you be saying that's that top down structure, or the more centralised, or the more top heavy it becomes difficult to get information flowing back up? Is because it's just coming down from the top and hitting problems, isn't it? Rather than, you know, being flexible and people being able to put feedback into the system. Is it too?
Sure, it is, but certainly with the big power projects, the national power projects, the hydro projects, big wind farms, that are also through the government. It's the government of Scotland deals with those things. And although the Highland Council has to do the planning, it's sort of like if we do anything that the company doesn't like, they will go back to Scottish government, the Scottish government will say change it. So it's very much reflects this big national company, SSE or SSEN or SSE Renewables, whatever the branch is, that they come in and they speak to the planning department, or they get these planning submissions drawn up, We should have had a nice presentation in the village hall with lots of pictures. And when it closed out of the day on a Sunday morning with a helicopter flying over the top, ferrying equipment to the upper dam site, and work activity on a Sunday was not meant to be part of the agreement. But it happens. Well, that's just one sort of isolated example.
Wow, yeah, I totally get that. I totally get that. Wow, we can get onto some subjects already, and they're all starting to connect in quite quickly, don't they? Andrew, have you got any more issues, more big issues that you would like to bring up?
I suppose the next one is one that I guess John and I both share, which is bus services, particularly in the Fort William area. And last summer, we saw a reduction in the level of services, with the council stating that one of the reasons is the timetable can't be met because of traffic congestion in the town, which seems a nonsense. Why cut bus services because of the traffic congestion? In fact, you want people to use the bus to help ease some of the congestion. We should actually have more bus services and a more regular service through the various routes around the town and to rural areas. For that. And it just sort of suggests that the councils sort of wipe their hands of ever trying to engage with the Scottish Government and Transport Scotland about actually solving the fundamental problems about traffic congestion in Fort William, which have been going on for 20, 30 years and continuously get worse, particularly during the summer months, but more alarmingly now during the winter months as well. So it's something that our community councils are raising. I know in John's ward, I'm sure he'll talk about it. Kilmallie Community Council are particularly exercised about it at the moment, and even more so with the announcement this week that was slipped out by our communications department at 8:30 on a Wednesday evening, that the council was buying DE coaches in Inverness, which is a big bus and coach operator, to the tune of, the newspapers are reporting this morning between £5.5 and £6.5 million. To a certain extent, I can understand why the council's doing that. It's to secure school contracts in the Inverness area, improve bus services, and join it with the council's own bus company that they started operating there. But not surprisingly, people in places like Lochaber are quite rightly upset about how that looks. You know, the council can commit to spending that amount of money, probably quite rightly in the circumstances for the people of Inverness. But on the other hand, they cut bus services in places like Lochaber, Caithness and Sutherland. It just seems as though there's no joined up thinking within the council, and it just feeds in to that perception, which I agree with and quite often exploit, that the council is Inverness-centric and really doesn't think about the areas much further beyond the end of Loch Ness.
I think jumping in there, you mentioned Kilmallie. You gave me a lesson that Kilmallie went to a public meeting last year, which was really, really well attended. A lot of energy and a lot of issues raised. A lot of things. Again, as you said, it's because of congestion, but there's two new developments or new-ish developments up at Kinturbine and Blairmurray, and they had a bus service audited. They lost the bus service because the company couldn't include it in the timetable because they didn't have the time to actually do that whole circuit because of the congestion in Fort William, as they said. So there's two areas of new housing where the council has a responsibility to provide transport, and they don't have a bus service. So obviously that's still seething in the area in terms of the new housing, older people and the areas that they're situated in. How do they get to the doctors? How do they get to the hospital? Potentially it's down to taxis, which are expensive. And also in Lochaber and sort of Cornwall and Corpac, there's sort of, there's not as many as there are in Inverness.
Yeah, that always seems to be a problem. So the people on the Blar there, like you said, they've not got a bus service yet, have they? I've heard. Is that correct? Yeah. So I mean, they've been there quite a while now. I mean, and it's quite a big place. So I would imagine a lot of them are exactly like what you was mentioning earlier. What is the problem with communication here? Why can't we have a bus service, even if it's minimal? We haven't got one.
We had a public meeting at Kilmallie, with the local bus company. They're very responsive, they're very good, the owner managing. Yes, they were quite open about the situation. Basically, because of the new development, it was like they had to go up to it and from back down to it. So it was adding that double distance on. But if they integrated, then by the time they got back down, they were due to be in Fort William, which was another bus meant to be coming back. And quite simply, they didn't have the extra bus or whatever, or the extra time clock to put in another bus, which would have been needed, to cover that extra mileage. And at the time, I think Andrew will probably remember it, they were working on a cycleway, one of the notorious junctions was to travel. And the congestion and the trouble that caused, it's right at opposite the high school, and the traffic was backed up. I don't know how far, but it's virtually all the way to Malling to the ferry. It was backed up the hill going up the Speen Bridge. Terrible congestion. And yeah, it's a problem that's been around for years, and some of it couldn't be solved simply by putting in an improved management system.
Yeah, that is interesting. I mean, in all my experiences of Shield buses and all the information I've had from them, I always get back good reports across the board. So would I be right in saying it doesn't seem like a problem so much of this particular company, because they seem a very good one? It seems to be more of a problem of getting things organised once again, the bureaucracy of it all. Would that be right?
Yeah, I think you're right, Eddie. And I would take my hats off to Shield buses. You remember how bad it was with Stagecoach not too long ago? David McGilvery and his father put a lot of effort into coming up with a local solution. They're a good local family firm, employ a lot of people in Lochaber, are good employers, to make sure that we had an operating bus service, and invested a lot of money into the company as well. I think there are two things that we as Lochaber councillors and maybe the community councils and all the other communities should be pushing for at the moment on this. One is that with the council's budget coming up, that we should have a rural bus fund. If we're prepared to spend the money on solving the bus problems in Inverness, then we need to solve the problems elsewhere. And £500,000 for subsidising bus services in places like Fort William and the rest of Lochaber and elsewhere, I think we should be pushing for. And the other one is, if we're not going to see look at Fort William Relief Road or bypass anytime soon, then we need, as John's just hinted, we need to be badgering Transport Scotland, who are one of the worst organisations to communicate with, is to actually to have a smart signalling system throughout the local road network. John mentioned the problems at Lochyside with the cycle path roadworks there. They were eased, from what I can gather, when Transport Scotland came along and changed the lights so that they had a smart light system. Well, if they can do it on that shorter section of the road and make a difference, then surely we can have a similar system that can help improve traffic flow throughout the entire Greater Fort William area. I think, okay, that is not solving the problem in the long term, because the long term is a relief road of some form or another, but it would go a long way. And then we have no excuses about bus routes not being able to operate because they can't fit in with the timetable because of congestion. We've got to solve the congestion because it solves so many other problems.
Yeah, I totally get that, Andrew. That really is getting down to the nitty gritty. All else fails if the infrastructure's not there, isn't it? I couldn't agree.
So you're jumping in on Andrew's point about money. There's another big issue at the moment is the visitor levy or the tourist tax, which sort of maybe a tourist tax as it's set out. It sort of taxes the locals as well. But again, potentially there is another source of money that could actually go into helping transport. Another issue, it would work in Malling, it would probably work in the northern side of Fort William, was to actually have a park and ride system. Lots of areas have them. We could use small minibuses, and there certainly is what's going is the land and the availability to put a car park and a bus to change that. So it's a possibility, and yeah, I went to saying to the council that they bought this new bus company. I've heard the reference of it for quite a while. They said surely they can spare 2 or 3 buses just to follow the out of Albert and just change the situation.
Yeah, it certainly is a minefield, John. Yeah, I won't mention about park and rides down in the north of England at the Lake District. They are extortionate. I mean, they are so exclusive. Let's not go there. But yeah, the levy. What do you think about that, Andrew, as well? Because that was something that a couple of people have mentioned to me that they would have liked to discuss the levy tax.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. I would say that my email inbox has exploded with visitor levy emails at the moment, not just from my own ward, but from some of John's constituents as well, and from business owners around the Highlands. My view is I am not opposed to a tourist tax or a visitor levy, whatever you call it. After all, I've travelled quite a lot around the world and I'm quite happy to pay €1 or €2 when I'm staying in a village in Switzerland. But that's not what we've got here. It's a very different setup, and the council and the Scottish government are pointing to Europe and saying this is no different from Europe. Well, it is very different. Very different in somewhere like Switzerland, where all of the money that is raised by the tourist tax goes to that local commune or canton, and it's spent there. And you can see how it's spent there because their services are fantastic as a result, and their public transport network is brilliant, and they have amazing waste collection services that is funded by the tourist tax. And you see the benefit of that, not just for you as a visitor, but also for the residents as well. But that's not what we've got here. And I'm really worried that the Highland Council is so blinded by the opportunity to do this because the legislation is there and that they believe that they can raise £10 million, that they are blinkered and that the current consultation is a consultation just for the sake of it, and that the administration by all costs will push this through. And in doing so, they will be failing to listen to, I think, a broad spectrum of opinion amongst our business community. These aren't the big hotels. These aren't the big multinational companies. These are small family-run businesses, accommodation owners that are going to be really impacted by this. First of all, they're going to be forced to collect this tax, which is a percentage tax. It's not a per head one like in Europe. It's a percentage tax that is going to push up prices for their accommodation. You know, I've seen figures that for a South Catering cottage in Strontian, it could add £150, £180 onto a week's stay. Now, if you're a family coming up from England, you know, you may think twice about coming and spending a fantastic week in Strontian and contributing to the local community. And then add to that, many of our accommodation providers are just below the VAT threshold where they have to start charging VAT. And the problem is the way this legislation is set up is that it's seen as a service. And so VAT will be charged on the tax as well. And it will push them over the threshold, which means that many will simply say, we don't want the hassle of doing that. We don't want the hassle of the bureaucracy, filling out the tax returns and the complications that is involved. So we're not going to open as long as we normally would. So we will shut our bed and breakfast at the end of September, and we won't open until the beginning of May. And that has a knock-on impact because we see a reduction in the number of bed nights available in Lochaber. We see a restriction in the number of people that these places can employ. There's so many knock-on impacts. And so at the moment, if the council comes along with the proposal that they've set out, with all likelihood, I will vote against it. I would like them to say, actually, let's pause this. We don't have to rush into it. Let's go back to the Scottish Government and say that we need to sort out these other issues first, such as the VAT problem. And the other thing, I'm going on at the moment, John, I will let you come in a minute. The other thing that I'm really worried about is we have no clarity about what the council is going to do with this money. And I really fear that it will be a typical Highland Council stitch up where they will say, right, okay, we will need to take the first 20% to set up the administration for collecting this, make sure that people are paying it, and we'll have to have a group of staff based in Inverness to do this. And then we'll take the next 20% and we'll have to have a central fund for projects across the Highlands. And then the rest of the money can be divided up using a really complicated formula that which no one understands, and we'll give it back to the local areas. But when we'll have to employ staff locally to administer how that money is spent, and it will be a bidding-in system, so local communities and organisations will have to apply for the money, and then we'll see how it goes. And that's exactly what happened with the Coastal Communities Fund, where we missed a real opportunity to have got the real benefit out of it. And until I see a system where the money that's raised in Lochaber stays in Lochaber, and it's decided how we spend it in Lochaber, with councillors working alongside the local communities and the business groups to decide what our priorities are, maybe the local bus services in Fort William and so forth, then I can't support it in the current format. So that's my rant over, John. Over.
But I'm very sorry, John, you started me off there. You didn't set money in Friday. The councils, the discretionary grants that the area used to be able to award, that funding has decreased considerably. So as councillors, as local councillors, we have less funding to be able to distribute to local causes, and more of it is being held back by central council. The other thing, to put a shout in, people would ring me up if I didn't. The ordinary person, and which dignity levy, if you're a gentleman living in Seoul, and I'm actually speaking for a particular gentleman that I won't mention, and he has to go to Inverness for an operation, because he has a wee Bedford, and wife needs to go with him, then because of the distance and the timings, they will have to pay for accommodation. So they will end up paying this visitor levy. Equally so, if someone's being reg floated to Inverness to watch the theatre or to watch the Scottish Ballet, again, they're local. They pay local taxes. They put up with the big major projects that are on their doorstep, and yet they're going to have to pay extra to go to their theatre to watch something for their local enjoyment. That, I think, is more important. If I didn't speak up for the small people, I would be getting a lot of emails about it. And it does have an effect. It has a really good effect. That's how I shall work.
I couldn't agree more. Once again, this is a fascinating conversation. I mean, would I be right in saying that, like most things, what we need is a balance? I totally agree with you, Andrew. We need to have a system whereby, the money, what's created, take out what you need in one simple thing for your services, whatever, and all the rest needs to be put back or devolved to the local area or whatever that issue is. Because then you can try to get a balance, can't you? Because otherwise, it's just not going to happen. What I mean by a balance is that they will be able to say tax this or raise this and see what they can do with it, because they don't want to deter people coming, like you said, because by charging too much, and nor do they want to, because your common person can't afford these prices, locals and people coming as well. So once again, it's quite exclusive. So if we're going to talk about the future of tourism in places like Fort William stuff, we're going to need to find a balance, aren't we? So we don't go to one way or to the other. And if we don't have some kind of long-term planning and better communication, like you guys are saying, we're just going to be heading into more turbulent times. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think you're right, Eddie. I think the problem with this whole issue is there's too many unanswered questions or too many loopholes. And, one of the reasons the legislation was introduced by the Scottish Government was to address some of the problems with over-tourism. And so that those areas like Glenfinnan or Glencoe or Stafford up on the Isle of Skye and communities around the North Coast 500 that are struggling to cope with the sheer numbers that are coming to the area can see some benefit with improved infrastructure. But the problem is we're missing out one of the biggest problems with that tourism problem, which are the people that are coming in camper vans to our communities. They will not be covered by this tourist tax because the legislation doesn't allow it, despite the government at the time being saying this is one of the things that we should be doing. And I don't want to discourage people coming in a camper van, but if we're going to have the numbers that we have with the understandable problems that we experience with them, then they should be contributing to this as well. Because if you talk to many of our communities, they will say that they see little benefit at the moment from camper vans descending upon the car park in Glencoe because they picked it up from Glasgow Airport. The first place they go to is the local supermarket to stock up with all their supplies they need. And then they spend the next 2 weeks traveling around the Highlands, stopping here, stopping a lay-by there, not using local campsites, not actually going out, using our local cafes and having dinners in restaurants, and it's not necessarily seeing the economic benefit that people think we might be getting from them. So if we're going to proceed with this, we need to go back to the Scottish Government and say the legislation needs to be changed and improved.
Can I push? I'd like to push back a little bit there, Andrew. It seems to me that you're sort of using a camper van as a scapegoat, really, a little bit. Because, I mean, for instance, once again, this is, to me, it's access and stuff. I mean, a lot of people I know who have fancy camper vans, they will go out and use the cafes and stuff. But then I know other people who have camper vans literally because they've saved up to get an old camper van because they can't afford, the really high prices of staying anywhere. And because of the prices of things, they literally will just go off to, like you said, Tesco's and Morrison's, pick up a few things and go away camping for the weekend. And I'm not saying, you can't this blanket because you need to have that balance. But it just worries me that, we can find scapegoats for,
Yeah, no, that's a very fair question, Eddie. And yeah, I could see that my comments would be considered a scapegoat. But I think there's a delineation here. I think the people that you're talking about are the people that are in, they've spent their savings or put their pension into buying a camper van, and they spend a lot of time going around the country doing it. And I generally do think that those people do contribute to the economy. But that's not primarily what we're seeing, particularly since COVID. What we're seeing is an explosion of people that are hiring camper vans from companies at Glasgow and Edinburgh Airport at great cost. They're really, really expensive, and the companies find ways of adding to that cost, which contribute to some of the problems that we've seen. I've been told that some companies will charge you £150 cleaning fee if you use the onboard toilet at all. And that's why we've got people, going to the loo in places where they shouldn't because they're not prepared to use the onboard toilet. So, I think much of the problem we've experienced is the explosion of that part of the market that are already paying for really quite an expensive holiday and are then trying to cut costs, understandably, rather than what I would call the leisure users, the way of life users that you're talking about, that have always been there and are always interested in the local communities and tried to. But I was using it as an example. I'm not saying they should be the scapegoat. I'm just saying that
like I said,
find a way of encompassing them into the scheme.
Yeah, well, like you did say that you need to find a balance. It's difficult to delineate. I take your point there. What do you think, John? What's your views on the camper vanners? Like you said, since COVID, it's interesting, isn't it? All them people, a lot of people came up and they go, "What a beautiful place! I'm coming back," and they come back in their droves, and what do you?
Well, but they're independent upon tourism. One needs that income. It's nice to have people in the area who appreciate it. I'm not sure everybody does. Certainly when we further it, I don't think the thing was any particular amount really. But there is an ethos. Whether it still is there, I don't know. But there was an ethos amongst a certain group in terms of how fast can you do it.
Yeah.
I mean, those 500 down. And it was all about speed. It was all about how fast we can do it. And again, our local economy, the little village shops, not very little out of that. I was down in Jura sort of not too long ago. And there was a little village shop there which I popped into. There was a lady behind the counter that sort of lived in the area, local community. There was a couple of locals in there, and we got chatting. And there was something about, that's what the Highlands is about. It's about the people. It's about what they did yesterday and sort of what the farmers doing and who's going to join and helping bring the lambs in, bring the sheep in for shearing or for lambing. So going into the local shops, although they might be a little bit more money, you're supporting the very thing that you're coming to see.
Absolutely.
I think there will be a bit of education in terms of, yes, we don't want to just fleece you. And maybe if that money is just gathered and taken to a central pot, and what will happen, because the local areas that people are coming to see won't get the funding, won't develop, won't have the coffee shops. So, again, it's about balance. So it's about balancing the needs of the local community, the needs of the national companies and the tourists and the people who want to come and see our beautiful Highlands.
I think you're so spot on there. Like you said, I think the attraction is going to places where have little family businesses and stuff like this, and because otherwise you're just going to end up with the ubiquitous Greggs everywhere you go. You'll be like, well, everyone will just be the same, and people are not really into that. You don't come to the Highlands to get all that. Like I said, that ubiquitous, design everywhere. You come up for. So, like you said, you've got to pay. You've got to pay a little bit more for it, and I'm sure most people would. Like I said, most people I think are good people. Most camper vanners are good camper vanners, but you do get the odd ones who are messy and leave a mess and spoil it for the rest. And then, of course, to me, that creates. Then you end up with legislation where they just do it across the board, and everybody suffers. As well, once again, with a balance, I'd like to try to see answers to that where you're not going to exclude people from using camper vans or getting access to the area, but you can, charge people or, more money or something, or say, with a camping van, if the people are leaving a mess, wouldn't it be great if the police could follow up on this and actually, prosecute them?
I it's been talked about amongst local councillors, and I've certainly had a few conversations. I recognise what you're saying, I recognise what Andrew is saying, but difficult point. I think there is a bit of a case for looking at comes to our Highlands, from the tourist zone, and maybe focusing on the people who are prepared to pay for that, or the people who actually contribute to the environment they'll come to see. I am going to put my foot in it. It's a risk, but I have seen a lot of it, and I know some people object. You will get people coming up from the big cities, from south of Scotland or even over the border, and come up for a weekend fishing. They borrow their car. You can see them turning up on the edge. It's sort of stacked with dirt bottles and what have you. They come and sit beside the road with their fishing rod, and they fish for the weekend. They have a good time. And then they go home again. The damage to that small single shot road that they do with their cars, they're not providing money towards. The local shops and the local thing. So actually, what are they putting into our local economy? I think we need to attract and work with the people that actually work with us. There are certain groups, and I'm not saying all fishermen are bad by any means. I've been fishing with my brother-in-law before he died, and it was a great opportunity to meet and to discuss and to have shared some special time together. It's that minority again. It's that minority of campers or people who use it. Unfortunately, in the discussion, I had a couple of times. I was discussing just the other day with somebody who's dog and road and some persons, their names or whatever, because they haven't used a local facility and they don't want it. I have that situation, and you get back and you're into batting your dog, and it's not tough. We'll go into further detail.
Andrew, just briefly, can you help me out? I mean, and maybe you too, John. I'm so old that I can't even remember, and I'm sure it's quite correct that, or it's certainly a cultural thing that citizens of the UK, right? If you're a driver, say for instance, and you pay your road tax and you pay this, that, and the other, you feel like, oh, well, I'm entitled to go anywhere in the UK because I pay my taxes and all the rest of it. But would you agree with me? We seem to be moving towards now because because councils are being defunded and having a much difficult time and they're having to raise funds themselves. But that makes it difficult, or that makes a change in how, say, for instance, I would interact with being, or thinking what a UK citizen is entitled to. Because if we start breaking it down into each region and stuff like that, is it going to be now that when a person sort of goes out and ventures out in the UK, each area you have to sort of, like with the clean air zones and stuff like this, do you think there's a change? Because to me, it seems there's a change where we've moved away from that. You pay one tax or whatever to pay for everything. And, the government will subsidize rural areas and stuff. And so that everybody gets a fair crack at the whip. Would you say that's changing, or have I got that wrong?
I'm Roger there. I think there's a change in public attitudes. Then excludes the language, perhaps. There are people who live in the cities, who live in city life. They have bus services, they have train services, they have footpaths, they have people to clean the footpaths. And if they throw a plastic cup from McDonald's onto the side, then somebody will come and pick it up. I still don't think that's right, but in the council area, in the Highlands area, they don't have that. And people come up from different environments and they don't quite know how to treat the Highlands. And as I said before, the very thing they are coming to see, which is our beautiful environment and our rips and our lakes and our rivers and our mountains and the forests, that potentially is what we're going to destroy if they don't change some of those habits and practices. So I think there's a lot of education needed. And it is, they have a difference. We see it sort of in the Highlands, that money is sort of become centric. The Highland Council meets in Inverness, there's an Inverness City Committee. For whatever reason, it seems to draw more of the funds, or maybe there's just more councillors there, and they are aware of the issues that are important in their wards for their people. But the difficulty is, I've said this about a lot of councillors, said the rurality of Highlands, the fact that we can't have 50-bed nursing homes because there simply isn't the population or whatever to deal with that. We need a smaller establishment, but the government set a line and said, oh, you get paid over 50 residents, so we suffer. So we're a very special place. I think Scottish government needs to recognise that and make adjustments accordingly. Sorry, Andrew, please carry on.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure there has been a change, but I do agree with John that there's been a societal attitude change. And I reckon it's certainly started before I became a councillor for the first time. And it's been exacerbated by COVID. We are so lucky in Scotland to have the right to roam legislation, and that we have free access to our countryside. And so I want to encourage people in our cities to be able to experience that. How fantastic that we can share what we don't take it for granted, because we don't, but what we are privileged to enjoy every day of the year. What a privilege it is to share that with visitors that do not have that ability. But with that comes responsibility, and there seems to be a loss of responsibility. Glen Etive in my ward has suffered for a decade, and it's got worse from COVID. Exactly, they're not fishermen. They are people that want to come up to the Highlands and have a party. They load up the boots of their car with booze and cheap tents bought from the supermarket, and they have a fantastic party. And then they leave everything behind. They trash the glen. They cut down young trees, green trees for firewood. I've even had cases where they've taken brand new 5-bar farm gates off their hinges and smashed them to pieces to use as firewood. And I think there's an attitude of, it's so remote, no one's going to be there, no one's going to care that we misbehave in this fashion. They leave all their rubbish. They leave that tent that was useless because it was cheap and nasty from the supermarket, and they're never going to use it again. And they head back home. And it's been virtually impossible to police that. It's costing a lot of resources for people like the National Trust and the estates and the council to then tidy up beyond them. And I don't know how we deal with that. I'm loath to be banning things, we could take the approach that the Loch Lomond National Park did, which is that they were going to have camping bans where there were problems. But I think that actually just pushed the problem a bit further north to places like Glen Etive. And if we pushed for a camping ban along Glen Etive, it just pushes it a little bit further north to Glencoe and Lochaber and so forth. When I was a councillor before, we were looking at actually having a alcohol bylaw that, in essence, would allow people to camp and enjoy the area, but, would restrict consumption of alcohol within a 250-yard distance from the single track road, which had support of the police. It had support of other local communities and various other organisations, but actually convincing the government that was something that was viable. I'm hoping, I know my ward colleagues, Kate and Sarah, have been trying to resurrect that in recent months, so I'm hoping that may be a way forward and at least a bit of a deterrent, because part of the problem is they come along their car and they see it as wild camping and they've walked all the 25 yards from the passing place that they've now blocked up. And that wasn't the intention of Rome and wild camping. It's a difficult issue, really difficult.
Yeah, the issue of wild camping is sort of, I've done it for many, many years. I did it as a kid. I did it as a Boy Scout. And the idea of going up into the wilderness, up in the forest, staying overnight in a tent, or lighting your campfire, having a meal. Absolutely beautiful, ideal. And I would love young people and people to come up to the Highlands and do that. But last year we had some major forest fires. One very close to Inverness, big one, not far from Fort William. And the issue that we have a completely retained fire service in Lochaber and our area in Road 11. And when there's a big forest fire, and let's be honest, firefighters are risking their lives. It's a local people. It's people that my daughter went to school with who are out in the fire tenders tending that fire. And if some of them get damaged or even, God forbid, die, that really touches the local community. So it's in that sense really sensitive. If you want to talk to Scotland and you feel liberating a campfire in the middle of the forest, I'm sorry, but you really need to know what you're doing.
Okay, so we both you both sound like you both agree. There should be more emphasis on education on how to treat the areas. And so, would you say that there needs to be more emphasis on education?
Yes, yeah, definitely. I think how we do it needs to be all around. Quite often we still see the tourists coming in the hire car that they picked up from the airport, and they're on the inside of the road, and they come out of the hotel, and it's easy to do that. They just slip. Over the last year, I've met 3 people who've been going down the roundabout the wrong way. So that education in terms of people driving, people hire. Certain groups of people hire a big car from the car hire people because they're used to big cars. And then they get up to the L82, it's a main trunk road. But to them, it's like a little side road. And with the big car they've got, they don't know how to take it around the bend. So again, education in terms of, yes, if you're coming to Scotland, if you're coming to the Highlands, the roads are unique. If you haven't driven these sort of roads before, get a nice little vehicle that you can handle really use. That's just one example, but education, how you get it out there to people.
Can I just ask one last point? Because this is always brought up when I've ever discussed this with people, is the idea of ranges. I mean, I like this. I think this should be discussed more because, to me, that would stop blanket legislation. It would allow for access. So the only problem there would literally be manpower and what powers they have to deter people from misbehaving, as it were. But what's your views on rangers, John and Andrew?
I fully support them. I don't necessarily think we would want to go down the route of the Ranger service in places like United States because that comes with a cost, and I'm not sure that's a route that we want to go. And in terms of education, they are really, really good. I'm going to give you the example of Durham and Kintunning Community Council that for the last 2 years have used some of their funding to employ a part-time ranger down on Clay, where we've had a particular problem with littering and so forth. And it's been really, really successful. Having a local person that's invested in the area, going and talking to visitors and getting them to appreciate, responsible tourism. But I suspect we need a bit more than that, because you hear of examples, in Glencoe, where National Trust have employed rangers, all down Glen Nevis, where the council had, through High Life Highland, rangers where they've want to speak to people and try to educate them about behaving responsibly in the community, and what they get in return is a tirade of abuse or that's ignored, and so forth. And it's how we give, do we need to give them some form of enforcement action that they can issue a £40 on the spot fine because you've been spotted littering, or you've had an open fire that has caused damage, and you haven't made good that damage. So some sort of environmental fine enforcement. But then that needs government backing, needs legislation, and it also, I suspect, needs some government funding as well.
Yeah, I totally agree. But that would be the best way to go about it, because if we can all agree that it's a very small percentage of tourists that make this mess, and if we can deter them, if they make a mess and they can be followed up and prosecuted for the damage that they've done or whatever, I think really that's probably the better solution. Would you agree with that? Or if that were possible, rather than blanket legislate and say, like you said, make it like a Loch Lomond, a non-camping area, would it be best if we could get the rangers in there, give them the appropriate powers and try to look after the area that way? Do you think that would be a solution?
I can't sort of speak about the Rangers too much. They do a brilliant service. They work really hard. I've met a lot of them. They're so passionate about the area. And different type of Rangers within the Highlands. There are those who focus more on education, going to schools and the pathways, and one of those who focus more on visitor management, etc. But all of the Rangers, they do such a superb job. The funding has been put in Lochaber. We've been really short of rangers in the last year. As a local area, we're looking at ways to actually fund more rangers. We even discussed the possibility of looking at the discretionary grant to actually do that with. That would involve more consultation, obviously, before we ever made a decision. But also the other side, in terms of traffic enforcement, there's a young traffic enforcement officer on now in the local area, and in going about his job, in asking somebody to move off double yellow lines, he got such a tirade of abuse and threat. He's on his own, he controls headquarters, but the area manager might be a confirmed ruin, which they can't away. So it's that balance. Okay, most people are really good, and most people will listen and they'll say, "Oh, I understand what you mean. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see it that way. I didn't think of that." But it's just the odd way. Yeah, the Rangers have met it down in BW8, the Silver Sands area near Malay, where people come in and they will say, "Well, I'm sorry, you can't sort of camp on the beach on the sand dunes. You're destroying the verges, you're destroying the land." And there was a fence there. Can you move on, please? And it might be 2 or 3 people camping, and you then get 2 or 3 big blokes who don't like the ranger saying that and don't want them here, are quite prepared to ask them if they do. And it's okay, have the balance. How protect the people who are doing those jobs? How do we make sure that they are safe in their work? I hope they're respected. It's not everybody. Most people are really good, but it's the who essentially gets into the newspapers and does the damage. It's how do we balance that? And again, I think it's money and it's willpower. We don't need just rangers. We need, like the police have done, if they're going out working the country roads, we need them to go out in pairs or maybe in threes, so they back up with each other. So if something does happen, one of them can get on the radio or contact the police and say, "We've got an incident, we need help here quickly." It's again, that's one day. Sorry.
It's a very, very difficult problem. Well, listen, we've really gone on. I really enjoyed it. But can we get to one last topic as I get hold off or we don't speak about it? Can we just have a quick discussion, if that's all right with you guys, just about this idea of the size of the Highland Council?
I guess I ought to start on this because anyone that knows anything about me will know that I've advocated for a long time that Highland Council, in terms of the sheer geographic size, is not fit for purpose, and that we should look at a more devolved form of government for the Highlands. I've never advocated that we return to the old district days. I don't necessarily think that a Lochaber district council is the waving the magic wand that will solve all our problems. But I do think that Highland Council should be split up so that we have a more localised and responsive form of government. And so I stood in the by-election on a platform with that, saying that I would introduce a motion to that effect before Christmas, which I did. I seconded it alongside a councillor from Wick. And I thought it was a good debate, but I was disappointed because we had a similar debate back in 2021 when I was a councillor before, which was narrowly defeated. And back then, councillor after councillor from the SNP party stood up in favour of it. And they voted in favour of breaking up the Highland Council. And what was very noticeable on this occasion was all of their leading councillors within the administration on the front bench sat quiet. It was almost as though they had been kidnapped by their independent administration colleagues, and they left it for a handful of their backbenchers to talk against it. So some of the very people that just 3 years ago voted in favour of beginning the discussion to break up the Highland Council voted to stop it on this occasion and criticised those of us that were advocating it. And I still do not understand the reason for it. It was the beginning of the process. It was the beginning of the discussion with the Scottish Government about, is this the best way forward? And what could real localised government look like in the Highland Councils? It wasn't me drawing a line on a map. I'm open-minded. I would personally advocate maybe a West Coast authority that accompanies a Lochaber, Skye, the northern part of Argyll, Oban, and Mull, because I think we have lots of shared interests and challenges, and that would be a good sized unit of government. But that's for further down the line. That's the detail of it. What we were talking about, the principle of it, and was having that discussion. And 6 weeks later, I'm still scratching my head as to why those colleagues that were such passionate advocates just 3 year ago remained silent on this occasion.
So you've not had a chance to speak to any of them? You've not managed to get any explanation?
No, I really haven't. Whether it is, I'm speculating whether it was a red line for the current council administration with the independent convener saying, well, because they voted against it last, if you vote in favour of that, that's the end of the coalition. I don't know. Maybe that's why their front bench remains silent. Maybe they are so enthralled at running Highland Council and so enjoying it that much and having that, that power grab that they don't want to give any of it away. Maybe they have been instructed elsewhere. Who knows? And unfortunately, since then, we really haven't had any in-person meetings as councillors. But it's something that I will continue to pursue. And I'll ask them. I'll put them on the spot. 3 years ago, Ken Gowans, Raymond Bremner, why did you vote to split up the Highland Council, and this time you didn't?
It's a shame to hear that. I mean, from my point of view, and I'm sure some other people would agree, I mean, I'm not totally sure. My intuition would tell me we'd be much better off if they were made into smaller parts. But I would be interested to hear discussion on it.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you're not, you can't even get that. It's not really good.
Well, I think what Andrew said, and for me, the important bit is he used the words to look at, and that was certainly the intent of the motion that was proposed or defeated that day in Highland Council. I think it managed to break the Highland Council councillors into 7 different factions. We've heard a lot of discussions since, but it was to look at the structure of the Highland Council and breaking it up into manageable units. It wasn't saying, I want you to vote for the brief of the Highland Council today. That's not what that motion was. It was just to look at it. And since then, I've had a lot of feedback from locals, I won't be named, but who have said that they were disappointed that the motion didn't go through, and they would really support an examination of the current structure and the way the Highland Council functions, because in their words, it's not working. And there's some very, very passionate people out there amongst the community. Some of them sit on community council, some of them just happen to run the local shop. But there's a lot of feeling about it out there. And yeah, I won't sort of hide it. I voted in favour of the motion. And I would like to see us come back to that and actually say, yes, we really do need to look at it. We're not saying we want to break it up. We're not saying we want to get rid of Inverness Council tomorrow. To look at it. I think it's important. Thank you. So,
I find that really perplexing. It's a perfectly reasonable request. Why would you not want to discuss it and examine it? I mean, how's that defensible?
And we have been so careful this time in phrasing it in such a way that it wasn't confrontational. I think the fault with the previous one was it was take it or leave it. And Andrew Jarvie and I, who were the proposer and seconder, we were so careful that it wasn't framed in that way, and that it was, let's go and ask the Scottish Government to start having this discussion. But, you know, it wasn't to be. I'm not going to give up. I think we should have that discussion. Our Lochaber colleague, Kate Willis, she put in an amendment that in essence said, instead we should have a review of devolving powers to area committees. And I support that. I really do. But from experience, I've heard that so many times when I was a councillor, that we were going to get funding for our area committees and we were going to get planning decisions back to our area committees, and none of it's ever materialised. And I'm not holding my breath that this review, if it even happens, will make any difference.
Can I just ask you then, maybe to finish off then, just once again help the viewers and help myself out. Would you be able to explain, so what's the process now that, like you said, you tried to get this motion through and it fails, but you're obviously going to pursue it. So how does that go? How long, say, will you be able to bring it up again? Can you bring it up all the time?
Yeah.
How do you work to bring a change about there?
That's a really good question, Eddie. So our rules say that it cannot be discussed in the chamber again for another 6 months. But that doesn't stop us holding the administration's feet to the fire, that they agreed to a review, and they've got to actually have that review, and they've got to implement the findings of that review on this occasion. And I, with many others, will be making sure that that is the case. But I am also thinking that actually, because in places like Lochaber, and I know in Skye and in Nairn, all over the Highlands, there is quite a lot of support for this, that we actually say, right, well, let the people decide whether they want this discussion. Let the people, we've got a Highland-wide election in 18 months' time on the day of the Scottish parliamentary elections. Well, why not have a referendum alongside that, with allowing the people to decide whether they think that we should be reviewing the makeup of the Highland Council. And that's something that I'm playing around in my head at the moment, and I want to have conversations with people like John and other colleagues around the council, whether that is something that we should be pursuing.
Personally, I think that sounds like a great idea. I mean, that's practically the ethos behind just trying to have a chat with you guys here, just trying to get people informed and trying to reach out there and try to get, people involved so we can make, push on with these decisions and stuff. I mean, for instance, I want to, like you said, talking of 18 months down the line and stuff, by then, I want to get to have some proper hustings, with all the candidates and stuff. I mean, I saw last year, sorry to say, with the Lochaber Chamber of Commerce, it was very restricted, the hustings and stuff. I much prefer to see it where we can get people on and just get people talking and get people to hear them and be able to talk about any subject they want, not have it restricted to a certain few topics and stuff. So once again, I think it's very important that, we try to keep the public informed as much as we can. I mean, at the end of the day, the council, yourselves are there to represent us, and used to you guys certainly seem to get that. Is there anything else that you want to bring up before we wrap up our first episode?
I think sort of on that topic, just to come back on already.
Yeah, no worries, John.
Sure, it's like so many things. We don't have the structure there. We have community councils, we have community councillors, we have very, very active people within the community. Technically, it's the community councils who should canvass their local area. All community council sort of are volunteers. They do it on a total voluntary basis.
Yeah.
But really, really hard, they use their own spare time to look at things. Well, it's not just the councils who are going through the planning applications, it's the local community councils who are going through the applications on a regular basis. I mean, John Thornton in Spring Bridge, he's the chair of the local community council. Sometimes he will give me information about planning applications I haven't noticed. I think we work well together. So that canvassing potentially to start out now. I did it some while ago with a very, very contentious issue of the national park. I tried to get local community councils to go out and actually garner opinion. Okay, what's the thing out here? What do people think of this? And sometimes some people don't even know the difference between a community councillor and an MP. Councillors in the middle, or sometimes in some people's minds don't exist. And I'm not going to room for that. We have busy lives we have to attend to.
Yeah.
And again, maybe there's an education. I think there is something about stirring the community, saying, look, we're more councillors. There's a really big issue here. We think it ought to be looked at. The people in the community we've spoken to think it ought to be looked at. Can you talk to your local community council? Can we do some sort of ballot? And I think we have the facility, we have the structure there to do it.
Yeah, that's great to hear that, and that's another subject, isn't it? Community councils and stuff.
Yeah.
Are they still getting a pittance of £400 a year or something ridiculous? I mean, could there be more support there for community councils? Do you think? Because, like you said, it's all voluntary. You know, they do a lot of work and they don't seem to get a great deal of help.
I think county council football has been put recently. It's in terms of indexing, we certainly haven't come up with the retail price index or any other index. And yeah, so that's £400. You know, if we're looking at a community council, maybe we ought to fund the treasurer and the chair. So we're looking at potentially tens of thousands per year. And the 400 that we've got is...
Yeah, and funds, like Andrew said earlier, maybe these could go to like a bus fund or something like this. Anyway, like I said,
maybe I'm trying to, I won't stop Eddie, but we're now bringing me into the idea of local planning and local planning.
Oh God, yeah.
Also in local councils.
We'll be going on for ages again. Listen, so we better finish there. I hope everybody's enjoyed the program and stuff. And did you two guys enjoy it? Are you okay with the format and stuff? Yeah, okay. So what I'll do then, I'll say goodbye to everybody here, and me and you guys, I'll get in contact soon. I mean, in a couple of months, and we'll do the quarterly. Is that okay?
Brilliant.
Brilliant. Well, listen, I'll say goodbye. I'll stop recording, and thank you very much. And I shall go very late to my next. Got to go pick up the wife. I'm already running late. But enjoy your trip in London, and thanks, John, so much. So nice to talk to you guys. Brilliant. I can't wait to catch up with you in February, March, April.
Thanks, everyone. I'll see you where it is.
Thanks very much.